There is good news about the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine. The Vaccine Advisory Committee, which is a panel of independent experts, and they advise the CDC and the FDA, they have now recommended that the pause which was placed on this vaccine like middle of April due to rare blood clot events, that should be lifted. And all US adults 18 and older are eligible like they were before. Now there will be some additional warnings, but it should be business as usual as before. However, if you have received this vaccine in the past, or your loved one or somebody in your family and circle of friends has received it, or you are thinking about it and following the news, I'm sure there are many questions still in your mind. Like, why was the risk so high that they had to put a pause on it? And why lift it now? Does it mean that everything is safe? What does it mean to you? I'm sure there are a lot of questions. Hello everyone, I'm Naveen Agarwal, and I want to welcome all of you to my weekly video update. So I want to talk about some of those questions and give you my suggestions and recommendations based on what I understood, based on public information. But more importantly, I want to dig a little bit deeper into how this decision was made using benefit risk analysis. Now, those of you who, like me, are involved in risk management of medical devices or medical products may have an interest in this because benefit risk decisions are not easy to make and they are required by regulations and some international standards. So we are always struggling on how to do it. And this happens to be a good case study. So I'll dig a little bit deeper into that. But first, let me tell you in full disclosure that Johnson & Johnson is one of my clients. And I have worked there for many years in the past. However, I have no direct contact with their pharmaceutical division where this vaccine was developed and launched. So I have no inside information, and all I know is from what is publicly available. And for this video particularly, I have reviewed the information that was presented to the Vaccine Advisory Committee for this decision. And it's public resource. I'll give you a link as part of this video. You can download those presentations and review them when you have time. Great information. So I'll rely on that particular information. Okay, so now let's first talk about the question, why was the risk considered so high that they had to put a pause on it? Well, beginning late March, when this vaccine was authorized and people began receiving the vaccination. Now, beginning middle of March to early April, they received 6 cases of a very rare blood clot, particularly in the brain. To begin with, those what they call CVST or cerebral venous sinus thrombosis events are rare to begin with. However, in this particular scenario, there was another rare event going on that most of these that they found out were associated with low platelet counts in the blood. Now, platelets are special kind of cells in our blood which help us in the case of injury, when we get injured, which actually help us with blood clotting. That's for our survival. It's a good thing. So if you have low platelets, why is the clot forming in your brain and causing all kind of problems and even hemorrhage, serious conditions? That was a pretty interesting question. And the consequences were very severe. People were presenting themselves with non-specific symptoms, and within a few days, their condition would become so bad that they had to go to the hospital, and all these scans would show enormous blood clots in their brain and even hemorrhages. Now, normal course of treatment may be that they may receive a blood thinner like heparin. And that is actually not the right thing in this particular case because there's another medical complication where you could get blood clotting induced by your immune system due to heparin treatment. They know that. So all of these things were going on. These events were rare, but they happened in a very short time frame and they were linked to the vaccine, and there was one death. So no longer a coincidence, something is going on. Particularly in light of the AstraZeneca vaccine and what happened. AstraZeneca vaccine is based on a similar technology platform of what they call the adenovirus vector. I've talked about that in one of my videos. You can find that on this channel. Similar things happen in Europe, and the health authorities in Europe took action. They had a lot more information, a lot more data. So it made sense for them to take a pause and say, let's hold on, let's review the data, evaluate the public safety risk, benefit risk, and take our next action. This is completely normal. It happened in the clinical trial with J&J vaccine. There was one case and they paused the trial, evaluated the data, and then proceeded forward. Completely normal with a therapy like this. But in today's environment where news travels fast, this was done in a very public way for transparency. But the consequence was also that it created a lot of uncertainty and anxiety because people did not get a chance to process this information well. And I spent hours reviewing this information to fully understand it myself. It's not easy to grasp all these details just from a news headline. So I understand. And in fact, the risk was an increase in vaccine hesitancy, and it has happened. Their current data as of last week is showing that there's a 20% increase in vaccine hesitancy against this J&J vaccine as a result of the first pause. So that was the risk they took. However, the hope is that through conversation and discussion and more understanding, we can overcome this hesitancy. So just to recap, it was a very rare event. It was associated with low platelet counts, and there was reason to believe that it is associated with the use of vaccine, especially in light of the events associated with the AstraZeneca vaccine. So there was something going on, not pure chance, pure random event. And in their preliminary calculation, their estimated frequency compared to what might be expected was 3 times more, even in some cases 14 times more. So there was cause to worry, right? There was cause to worry and evaluate the information. Okay, so now that it has been done, I will go into that part in more detail, but let me emphasize this. First of all, 2 points. If you have taken the vaccine and it has been 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, you are completely out of the risk window, what they call the risk window, because everything that they have seen tends to happen within 7 to 14 days of receiving the first shot. It's only one shot, okay? So you are out of the risk window. If you haven't taken the vaccine and you are hesitant, I hope you will rethink your decision, okay? Because right now the situation is no different than when the vaccine was first authorized. It is still allowed for 18 plus and older. Benefit risk is a little bit more clear. That's why the warnings and precautions are more clear now. But the situation is no different than what it was before. So there should be no additional reason for vaccine hesitancy, especially for this vaccine. I hope you will reconsider that. Okay, so having said that, now let's look into what prompted the lifting the pause. What prompted that? What kind of data did they evaluate and analyze? A lot of data, and they did a lot of simulation and modeling. So first, let's talk about high-level benefits, right? We know COVID has been a disaster, a public health disaster for all of us, worldwide public health disaster. In the United States, since last year, about 32 million infections, 564,000 deaths, enormous public health crisis, and the cost that we have had to bear. So any vaccine which is at least 50% efficacious has benefit for public health. J&J vaccine has more than 50%. Sure, it has less than Pfizer and Moderna, but remember, FDA's baseline expectation was 50%. And J&J's vaccine clinical trials were done potentially when new variants were present in the population that they tested during clinical trials. So there is reason to believe that it may be more efficacious against these new variants. Single shot vaccine, no ultra cold refrigeration required. So it can be made available in remote locations, in countries where refrigeration infrastructure is not that advanced. From an equity point of view, this is a good option, public health option to have, right? So benefits, definitely very clear, conceptually. But let's put some numbers around that. And that's where the fun is. For a technical person like me, that's where the fun is. So what they did was they simulated 3 scenarios. Let's say we completely stop J&J vaccine. Do not resume vaccination with J&J vaccine. Or limited to 50 plus. Or the third scenario was 18 plus and above, everybody. 3 scenarios. So what they're saying is, let's say we go to pre-pause scenario, right? And we make assumption that vaccine hesitancy will remain the same. Pfizer, Moderna vaccination rates will remain the same. Many assumptions, yeah, we understand that. But if we do not resume J&J vaccine, their estimate was it'll take them up to 88 days, beginning April 23rd, to vaccinate everybody who intends to be vaccinated. 88 days. But if you open it up to everybody, 18 plus and above, 74 days. So big reduction. Big reduction in the time frame it'll take to vaccinate everybody. And remember, the sooner we vaccinate most people, the further we reduce the likelihood of new variants emerging in our population, right? More importantly, many countries in the world who were waiting to receive this vaccine are on hold, right? So for them, there is no other option. At least in the US, we have Pfizer and Moderna, but many countries, they don't have any other option. And they could benefit more with this one-shot vaccine, doesn't require refrigeration in a very big way. So this should come as a welcome news, right? Okay, so they estimated 74 days versus 88 days. But more importantly, they estimated about 25% fewer deaths that would otherwise occur, right? Let's put some numbers behind that. So they are saying that even if the rates, pre-pause rates, resume to about 50% with J&J vaccine, just 50%, right? And 18 plus and above, they're estimating about 26 cases of this very rare event, which could be life-threatening, granted. But now they know a lot more about that and they can treat them even with non-specific symptoms. They know what to do. So the likelihood of recovering is much, much higher. We don't have much surprises. So let's say 26 cases, about close to 10 million vaccinations of J&J vaccine moving forward at 50% pre-pause rates. Even in that scenario, 1,500 fewer deaths and over 2,200 fewer ICU admissions. So let me repeat that. Even under 50% pre-pause scenario of vaccination rates with this J&J vaccine, when you open it up to 18 plus and above, 1,500 fewer deaths and over 2,200 fewer ICU admissions. That is an enormous potential impact. And of course, there are other scenarios where these numbers could be even higher or maybe a little bit lower. But the point is, they have done the simulation. They are not just hand waving. They are just not painting an abstract picture. They are clearly showing a tangible benefit to population level health. So you might be saying, yeah, fine, but what about at an individual level? What if I have some medical conditions which put me at a higher risk? Do we understand enough of my specific risk? I would say the answer is yes. You just need to talk to your doctor and have a discussion early on. Okay, have a very specific discussion and plan in case you begin to see some of these non-specific symptoms. You could do that at an individual level. They know a lot more about what to do. That's why the warning is going into the vaccine-related materials, and they will be able to handle that. Okay. So in terms of the potential harm, yes, if even at 50% rate, you could have about, let's say 30 cases out of 10 million vaccinations. So on a frequency basis, it is low, but good news is they know what to do about them. So I hope it clarifies in your mind a little bit about what went into the benefit risk decision. Another factor that went into benefit risk decision was equity. We know that many segments of our population, especially the minority segment, the underprivileged segment, they are disproportionately impacted by this. And they don't have access. So it's a question of equity. Even people who are not in that group but live in remote areas, rural areas, they do not have access to a good vaccine option. That went into play. Public perception and value went into play. Resource requirements went into play. And stakeholder perceptions and expectations like, government authorities, governors, local authorities who are fighting very hard every day to vaccinate as many people as possible, their expectations and values went into play. So, very complicated scenarios. But they looked into all of that. And this meeting lasted about 4 or 5 hours, I believe. Big deliberation. And at the end of the day, their conclusion is, let's go back to where we were, 18 plus and above, with additional warning on the label to inform patients, caregivers, and doctors. So I hope it clarifies the story for you. I don't want to go into too many technical details, but I'll give you the link to those presentations. You can look them up yourself. Just remember, this is definitely benefit risk has been proven again like it was before. All we have is some additional warnings. I sincerely hope if you are hesitating about this particular vaccine or any other vaccine, I sincerely hope you will reconsider, reach out to me or other people, ask questions, ask your doctor. No action is much higher risk than taking any of these vaccines. And I say that with utmost sincerity and respect for your feelings. Please reach out anytime if you have any questions or comments, would like to learn more. I will dig in to any information that is publicly available and bring you my understanding. I look forward to hearing from you, and I hope all of you are staying safe in these very difficult circumstances.